Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barbara Coachberg, and I want to welcome you to our final session, not only for tonight with Avram Rosenzweig, but also for our 2021-2022 season of engaging in education here at Beth David, as we take a hiatus for the summer. Of course, there are already plans in place for the fall, with an Ethiopian Shabbat, a Sigd celebration following 50 days after Yom Kippur, and the cultural and cuisine event to learn about Ethiopian traditions. All the committees have been thinking ahead and are already arranging for exciting events. On behalf of Beth David, Beth Tikva, and Beth David Women, our partners, we look forward to reflecting and planning over the summer to prepare for the next year. Avram has given us knowledge and understanding over the past 3 weeks and has inspired us on how to help and why. Tonight, he will help us with the specifics of where to direct our resources, time, and efforts to begin this important task of Tikkun Olam. Avram is now a purpose and meaning coach, and I encourage you to go online and learn about this new career change of his, and also see his fabulous smile. Check it out. He is passionate about inspiring others, as we have seen. And to quote him, quote, "I have always been called upon to mentor, instruct, and teach others. This has given me great joy," end of quote. His love of learning and his joy in sharing have been evident throughout his classes. In the final section of the lengthy Torah reading Naso just completed, describing the gifts brought by all 12 tribal chieftains as part of the dedication of the Mishkan, may we be successful in our endeavors of nurturing and helping our communities in their time of need. I don't know how to find a Tikkun Olam project, Avram. Please help me help.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you very much for all the introductions over the last few weeks. They've been very thorough and very well researched. So you clearly take your job very seriously, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody here tonight to our fourth and final shiur on this series, which we've effectively called How to Be a Mensch, and we've covered quite a bit of ground, very thorough ground as well. And I, for one, have enjoyed it a lot, both the research as well as the teaching. I hope you have as well. The thing that I find is that it's true that when you teach, you become so much better of a learner. And you do because it's imperative that you share information that's real, that's honest, that's authentic, hopefully that's well thought out. And in order to do that, one has to do a lot of research themselves. So I have done a lot of research for these classes, and hence I have learned a lot. And for that, I thank you. I also want to thank Beth David Synagogue for this opportunity, in particular the Education Committee, as well as Michael Rubin, Cora, Heather, and everybody else who's been involved and has been so gracious. Front office, Faye. Beth David is a wonderful synagogue, and I've been part of it for many, many years, and I always feel at home there. There's this tremendous sense of Tikkun Olam that happens within the shul. And it's a very, very kind place. It's bottom down and top down, and really a grassroots shul as well. And it's certainly Rabbi Scheim, the Rabbi Emeritus, has really set the tone for, I think, a very friendly and warm and menschlich and loving place. But Tikva I don't know very well. I've attended a few services there. I think I've spoken there as well. But I look forward to getting to know the shul more so. And Gail, thank you for your work on this. That Tikva seems like a lovely place. And I think the amalgamation when it goes through is going to be very, very special. So you should go out to each and every one of you. I do want to dedicate this year to the people of the Ukraine who are suffering terribly and continue to, and we can only wish them peace. And with that, we say, Oseh Shalom B'Ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen, that there should be peace upon them. And of course, it always behooves us to wish similarly for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael and Israel. It's somewhat of a precarious time, although it's usually a precarious time for the Jewish people and also for the Jewish people in the diaspora. I want to also wish Refuah Shalema, that those who are sick, those who are ill, should recover very, very quickly. And we've all gone through a very difficult time with COVID. I don't know if it's the end of it, or I don't know where we're at in terms of COVID, but clearly it's taken a lot out of all of us. So Refuah Shalema to those who are sick, continue to be careful, and hopefully, person kind can move forward in a healthy, positive manner this year. As we approach the summer, I wish you a beautiful summer. More on that later, but hopefully, God willing, we'll have nice weather, and there will be a sense of peace around us and within us. The question that or the topic that we're dealing with tonight is how do I find a Tikkun Olam program or project? And what I'm going to broaden that a little bit. So really, what we're going to be talking about tonight is volunteerism within the Jewish world. What does the Jewish world have to say about volunteerism, and also to extend it outwardly to the world at large? So we will be privy to some thoughts and ideas as to what the Torah says about volunteerism. Similarly, there's some reports that I've done some research on through the United Nations on worldwide volunteerism. One of the things I'll tell you straight off is that, so often we think that we in the West are sort of leading the brigade when it comes to volunteerism and helping and so on. But the truth be told, that when you go to South American countries or Central American countries or countries in the continent of Africa, that volunteerism can be quite rampant as well and very popular. So we shouldn't think that we are the only ones who are involved in volunteerism. And similarly, what I'd like to do is, if we divide this into thirds, I'd like to present you with some interesting volunteer opportunities that exist here within our community. And we are a panacea, really, of volunteer opportunities. I say that as part of the Jewish community. And we're actually living in a very interesting time because it's a nouveau time. There are interesting and new things happening within our community. We seem to be going through transitional phase. And one of the things that's happening is, just to give you sort of a sense, just to get you excited about that part of the shiur, is I don't know if any of you know Sandy Buckman. Anyone here know Sandy Buckman? Yeah. So Sandy is a very, very special man. Very, very special man. He's a doctor, and he is involved in so many different things in life. And one of the things that he decided to do was found or co-found a hospice, a Jewish hospice in Toronto. So we'll dabble in that a little bit. I'll give you a sense of what that's all about and other such things. And certainly Via Hafta will be on my agenda of organizations to talk about. Okay, so before we get going, anyone need to go to the washroom? I'm just kidding. That's what I say to my son. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in here? Okay, I'm the unmuted guy. In other words, at any point in time, if you have something to say and it's obviously particular to what we're talking about, please say it. I like to hear from people. I like to hear from people more than myself because I know what's on my mind, and so interaction within my shiurim is very important. Okay, so please feel free to jump in, but do so obviously in a way where at a time when nobody else is talking. I have some dear friends here, and it's so nice to see you guys. You know who you are. People I don't know, it's lovely to see you once again. So let's get going. Tikkun Olam, we'll call it that, okay? Repairing the world. It's part and parcel to who we are as Jews. It's discussed in the Torah, not so much as the Tikkun Olam as we know it in our day and age, certainly through the conservative Reform community, Reconstructionist. It's discussed differently within the Orthodox community. But at the end of the day, it's talking about chesed, kindness, and from a mystical or Kabbalah point of view, a mystical point of view, it's talking about repairing the world and the shards that broke off of this creation that God made, calling it Earth, planet, of which we inhabit. It's our task to put that back together. So while God in traditional understanding of Judaism is perfect, the idea that he or she created a world which is imperfect, essentially the idea behind that is to get us to volunteer. In really simple terms, it's to get us to become part of making the world whole, okay? And that you will see throughout the Torah. Rabbi Sachs wrote a beautiful, who's the former chief rabbi of the UK, he passed away last year. He wrote a beautiful article called "The Jewish Community Could Not Exist for a Day Without Volunteers." And he, in this article, and you can find it online, in this article, he draws upon his own history when he was younger, and the Olympics came to the UK. He said that there were 70 or 80,000 people who were involved in volunteerism throughout the country. And he said a very interesting thing happened. He said that the country became much kinder and became much gentler. And there was greater amount of brotherhood, and there was a greater amount of sisterhood. And he said it was really a pleasure to be in the country and in London at that time. He says that it was a reminder of truth we sometimes forget, that the greatest untapped source of renewable energy is altruism. And he concluded that sentence by saying people want to give. He said that the greatest untapped source of renewable energy is altruism, and that people want to give. So, I mean, that statement in of itself really cuts right to the very, very core of what we're speaking about tonight, which is volunteerism. The inevitable question is, why should you volunteer? The answer, according to Rabbi Sachs, is because you want to. It's because people want to give. Now, let me throw this open for a moment. What does he mean that people want to give? And maybe draw upon your own experiences. People want to give? Is that true? Do people want to give? Noreen.
I think people do want to give. They may not be able to or want to always give money, but I always feel that my time is worth something, and if I can help, and it interests me, I'll try and do it.
Okay, good. That's a really good point. So much of it has to do with our passion for the task at hand. It's very hard to be involved in volunteerism or Tikkun Olam if it's something that you hate. But I will tell you something, that very often we are pulled in to things that we hate. Has anybody studied the Parsha this week, Halotcha? Okay, when you study the Parsha, you're going to find that the Jewish people in this Parsha start to complain that they don't have enough meat. So they're not vegans. And they complain and they complain ad nauseum. Moses goes before God, and you know what he says to God? He goes, he says, what, you hate me so much that you're putting all this on me? I can't handle all this. This is way too much. He said, kill me. Literally, that's the words in the Torah. Moses was the consummate prophet. He was a consummate leader. And he said, God, kill me. I can't deal with this. Write me out of the book. Just take me away from all this, right? Moses was involved in Tikkun Olam, right, Noreen? But he was doing something, certainly at that time, which most leaders go through, of a Tikkun Olam nature that he hated. He hated it. Anybody who's ever been at the head of a committee or at the head of an organization or the head of a company, and I would even argue at the head of a family, a parent, at some point in time, and I don't think this is hyperbolic, we go through a phase where we hate it. We got to get out of there. We can't take it. We can't take it. That's part of Tikkun Olam as well. Tikkun Olam is not always doing the things that it's a luxury, to say, I'm going to do stuff that I like. It's a beautiful luxury to have. But sometimes we find once we ensconce ourselves in a committee, let's say, that it becomes very onerous, and Tikkun Olam cannot necessarily always be joyous and fun and happy and good. Sometimes it's the opposite, but it's still Tikkun Olam. One might even argue it's greater Tikkun Olam. So what does Rabbi Sachs mean that people want to give? Thank you, Nuri. Appreciate that. What does he mean people want to give? Do we, Taka, want to give? Do we?
I think in my time, Michael, I was a teacher for 43 years. I'm retired now, but I love teaching. So I still want to give of myself to teach. I'm not looking for a job. I've been offered many times. I said, no, this is now on my time. So I found many places I can volunteer my time teaching. And the reason I do it is I love doing it. I love teaching. I love helping people. It makes me feel so good. When I'm teaching a class, we have Catholic students that come to Beth Tikva, and I'm one of the people that teaches them about Judaism.
Yeah.
When I finish teaching them, I'm on such a high. I cannot tell you how amazing it feels to be in a room with these young people for an hour and be able to explain about the religion that I love and that I live.
Why is that high so important to you?
Why is
take it to the next step. I know what you're saying. I know when I finish this year, I feel like $1 million. But why is that high so important to you? Why do you keep going back to it? Other than the fact that it feels great, what are you accomplishing at its essence?
I believe that my dealing with those kids helps them to see us in a way that is at the very least respectful. That I am helping in some way the relationship between future generations of Christians and Jews. So to me, it's something worthwhile in my mind.
Yeah, so you're a little bit like a shaliach, right?
I guess in a way, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt that many times myself. As an example, wearing my kippah in public, especially when I was in Kitchener. I was born in Kitchener, Ontario. My father was the rabbi there. I was the only religious kid, and when I used to wear my kippah, I felt like I was a representative of the Jewish people. And I concur with you. And I would argue, by the way, that most or many Jews, probably every Jew that's on this Zoom call right now, on the Zoom shiur, feel the same way. When we go into a store and we're unsatisfied with what's going on there in terms of the service and so on, a lot of us think in our heads, and tell me if you guys agree with me or not, a lot of thinking is that, I'm a Jew, and I'm a visual Jew, maybe wearing a kippah, maybe wearing a Magen David, and I have to make sure that I represent our people properly. Is that correct to say that many of us do feel that way? Just put up your hand if you ever feel that way. Like an emissary of the Jewish people. Michael, where did you teach for so many years?
I taught at Thornley Secondary School in York Region for 24 years.
Yeah.
I taught at Nitivot Torah Day School for 10 years.
Well, do you miss it?
Oh, I miss the teaching. I don't miss the marking and the meetings and all the other stuff that went with it. But the kids, I've always loved teaching kids, always. And I had the greatest thrill during COVID of teaching my grandchildren.
That's nice.
When the schools were closed down, I could be their teacher.
That's so nice. Do they come back to you, the students whom you taught many years ago?
I just visited with a young woman. Well, she's 39 and her husband's 40.
Yeah.
And she teaches all over the world. She comes back to Canada once a year, and I'm one of the first people she sees. I taught her when she was 16 years old.
Oh, you must feel great when she sees.
Oh, I love it. And her parents, I mean, we're so close. We touched each other Okay, you know how you say you learn from your students?
Yes.
I learned so much from her as well as she learned from me. And we've been friends ever since.
So I'm going to tell you an interesting thing, and this is for everybody. That again, in this week's Parsha, Parshat Bahalotcha, when Moses was complaining to God, he said to him, I can't take this. I can't take this. I need help. That's what he said. I need help. So he was instructed to find 70 men. And those 70 men basically were to take some of the onus, some of the responsibility off Moshe's shoulders, and to be able to direct the Jewish community, and basically to create a much larger committee. So God says to Moses, he says to him, I'm going to imbue them with a little bit of your spark. I'm going to imbue them with a little bit of your spark. Now that's a very cool thing. And basically what the Meforshim say is God is going to take some of that illumination that Moshe, the greatest prophet ever, had within his soul, and he was going to give it to these 70 people a little bit. Rabbi Sachs came along and he said, that's the greatest gift that any leader can have. And when I say leader, I'm extending that to teachers and other such careers. Why? Rabbi Sachs says, he says that when you teach, when you're a rabbi, when you're the head of a committee, there always comes a point where you start to second guess yourself, where you don't know if you're being effective or not. And you take a look at yourself and say, my God, really, like, what am I doing here? I had that at Via Hafta. I had that many times. It seemed to come every 5. It was like the 7-year itch. Like, you remember that with Marilyn Monroe, that movie. It was like the 7-year itch. I would get it every 7 years, and I would truly question what I was accomplishing. Rabbi Sachs said that God gave Moshe Rabbeinu this beautiful gift. When he imbued those 70 people with a little bit of Moshe Rabbeinu's spark, essentially what he was showing Moshe Rabbeinu, and he was showing those 70 people, the effect that Moshe had on the people themselves. He says, normally what happens is, unfortunately, we pass away and people say beautiful things about us in our eulogies, hopefully, right? He goes, in this case, Moshe Rabbeinu was given some insight into the effect that he had on people. Now, studies show that when people volunteer, or when they're at the head of something, okay, in that light, and volunteerism basically is giving of yourself generally for free, right? The payment you get is a mitzvah or nachas, that people's lives are better. People's lives are better, but we don't always see that. So Rabbi Sachs continues, and he says, okay, Kinderlach, where does volunteerism fit in within the Jewish people? This is what he says. Our community could not exist for a day without its volunteers. They are the lifeblood of our organizations, whether they involve welfare, youth education, care of the sick and elderly, or even protection against violence and abuse. It's a tradition going back 26 centuries to the Babylonian exile, when, for the first time after achieving statehood, Jews found themselves without a land or a home of their own. They were without rights or power. They knew that if they were to maintain a communal infrastructure, they would have to do it for themselves. So began a tradition of voluntary collective responsibility that sustained Jews throughout centuries of exile and dispersion, during which always and everywhere they were a minority, usually vulnerable, and often desperately poor. He continues, in medieval Europe, wherever you found a community of Jews, you would also find a dense network of chavrot, fellowship, for every conceivable purpose: food and clothing for the poor, dowries for the poor brides, medical attention for the sick, burial of the dead, support for the bereaved, assistance for the underemployed or incapacitated, and a system of education, schools and adult classes unrivaled elsewhere. And this was driven by the twin principles laid down by the pre-Christian sage Hillel, who said, if I am not for myself, then who will be? But if I am only for myself, what am I? It was in essence a voluntary welfare state, and it gave rise to habits of the heart that still mark Jewish communities today. You know, friends, when I remember when I was working at the UJA, that was from 1990 to 96. It was then that Howard Price and I became friends. We worked together. Howard as a volunteer, and I was an employee of the UJA. And I remember that different communities would come to us, and the Jewish community, that is, and they would ask us for insight. I remember in particular the Jamaican community at that time came to us, and they wanted to build a community center. And basically they asked us for advice on how to do that. Now, the Jamaican community was not the only community that asked for advice. In fact, it's not unusual at all for other communities to come to us because, as Rabbi Sachs said, we were unrivaled in that area, in the development of our communities. And more often than not, it was because of the Balabati. It was because of the volunteers, right? It was for those people who would get up at 6 in the morning because they were running an education committee at Beth David Synagogue, and they had to go to work. So the only time really they could get this done was by doing it before they went off to work, right? Or you meet people who are presidents of shuls. Now, the president of shuls is probably the most onerous job on planet Earth. If you've ever been on a shul board, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's very, very hard. Shuls are sort of a place that can be highly contentious. Did I tell you the joke last week about Jacob, about Yaakov sleeping on the stones? Did I tell you this? I've been teaching different shurim, so I can't remember who I told what. But here's the joke. Yaakov, Jacob, you'll remember he laid down his head and he put stones around his head. You remember that parsha? Yeah. And a ladder came to him in his dream, and in the ladder, angels were ascending and descending. Anyways, and the angels, the rocks, according to the Meforshim or the Midrashim, started arguing between themselves. And what do they argue about? Which stone is going to have the kavod of Jacob putting his head on, right? One rock would argue with another, the other would argue with this next one. And when Jacob woke up, he said, "Here is where the temple is going to be. This is where our great shul is going to be." So they asked, how did Jacob know that? Because even the rocks were arguing. Anyways, I like that joke. Volunteerism is inherent to the existence of our of our communities, and without it, they simply would not exist. Certainly not in the way that they would. And as I've said in the past, Maimonides Rambam said, "I have never ever met a community. I've never seen a community that did not have these things, as I just mentioned before: food and clothing for the poor, dowry for poor brides, medical attention for the sick, burial of the dead, v'chulu, 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 etc., etc., etc." To be a Jew is to be part of a community. To be part of a community is to be part of a very well-honed, a very, very well-oiled structure that ensures that the poor are fed, that ensures that the bride who can't afford the dress or can't afford a chuppah or can't afford a dowry is taken care of. And as we know here in Toronto, which is a very wealthy community, both Jewish and non-Jewish, indeed, we have those things within our community. Everybody here is aware of Tomchei Shabbos. You guys know about Tomchei Shabbos? Tomchei Shabbos is a beautiful organization that was started up by a number of frum guys, one of whom is Bubu Zlotnick, very special man. And essentially what they do is they provide food for 400 families for Shabbat. 400 families for Shabbat. It's a very, very well-oiled organization. Many of my nephews volunteered with them. And what's beautiful about them is that they really follow the rules of halacha in terms of how to give, how to volunteer. As an example, my nephew would tell me that they would be given X amount of boxes to deliver to X amount of houses. Let's say 10 boxes, 10 houses. Some had children, so the boxes had more food in them, and they had cholent in them, they had candles in them, everything that you needed for Shabbat. And what they would do basically is they would go to the house and they would put the box there, they would leave it there, and they would run away, right? Or they would knock on the door, or ring the bell, or whatever, but then they would leave so that, chas v'shalom, God forbid, they weren't seen as dropping on this food, because it can be very, very embarrassing. So this is what Rabbi Sachs says. Now, some of the things that we find in the Torah that speak to volunteerism, that speak to giving, that speak to sharing, that's ubiquitous. I mean, we find it over and over and over. There's even instructions according in halachot, in the Mishnah Torah, in the Rambam, as to how one is supposed to volunteer. So let me tell you a few things, and this will jog our thinking a little bit. In Mishnah Torah 6:6, it says as follows: if a stranger comes and says, I am hungry, please give me food, we are not allowed to check to see if he is honest or not. We must immediately give him food. Okay? The stranger comes and says, I'm hungry, please give me food. We are not allowed to check to see if he is honest or not. We must immediately give him food. Why might this be the halacha? Why might the Mishnah Torah tell us this is your instruction, volunteers? Somebody comes to you and they said, I'm so hungry. You're volunteering at the Via Hafta kitchen. We have a brand new kitchen at Via Hafta, state of the art, right? You're volunteering there and someone comes in off the street. They say, I'm hungry, I'm so hungry, but they're dressed very nicely. Halacha says you can't ask them. You can't make it, give them a questionnaire. You just give them food. Why might that be? Why might that be? Naomi Nemiroff, shalom. So nice to see you. Why is that? Why do we have to just give them food?
Because it's the right thing to do. You see a need, you hear a need, you fill the need.
Yeah, the house is burning, you put the fire out. Right, and you don't take a moment to say, are you hungry? No, 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 no. There was a story of a rabbi, I forget his name, and he was getting off his horse, and an ani came to him, a poor man came to him, and he said, Rabbi, I need food, can you feed me? The rabbi said, please give me a moment, I just want to, take the saddle off my horse. As soon as he got the saddle off, he turned to the man, and the man had died. And the rabbi punished himself for the rest of his life. So yeah. If the guy really doesn't need, okay, so you're giving food to a person who doesn't need it, right? Not the end of the world. But
okay, I have a question, possibly. Yeah. All right, I have a friend who has a son with smicha, and I belong to Canadian National Council of Jewish Women, and we, in the past, before COVID, we used to go a couple of times in the winter to a church and cook dinner for the youth, like street kids. We never asked who they were. Maybe some were Jewish because they thought our food tasted like their bubbies. And we thought it was great. But this young man said we shouldn't be doing that. First, we should be giving to the Jewish community. Well, we felt there were lots of other people giving to the Jewish community, and we were giving to the community. And I know when I walked into that church and knew that I was going to work like an idiot for 4 hours, I felt good, because those kids, when they heard the Jewish ladies were cooking, they lined up around the corner.
Yeah,
it was amazing. So
it's a good question you're asking.
Yeah, I want to know why some people feel, well, you should only give to the Jewish people. And
Right. So there's different schools of thought on this within Judaism. There's a school of thought that says really as Jews we have to tend to Jews, and there's another school of thought that says no, you give to Jews and non-Jews, predicated on the need. So the rabbi was clearly looking at one point of view. He was looking at one way of seeing this. Now, just to expand on that a little bit, people used to come up to me all the time, and after I started Via Hafta, and they would complain and they would say, why are you taking the Jewish community's resources to help the Goyim? Yeah. So I said, listen, the Jewish people are a pie, okay? And that pie is cut into many, many slices. I use food as an analogy. One of those slices is, let's say, Haredi Jewry. Another slice is conservative Judaism. Another slice is the women who work within Judaism and bring a femininity to our peoplehood, and the men who bring a masculinity to it. Another slice of that pie is we at Via Hafta, or the people who subscribe to such an ideology as we did, and that is going out as Jews, as shlichim, right, like Michael Bernstein, and enhancing and making this world a better place. Judaism talks about the concept of darkei shalom. Okay. Now, the first thing is you say, listen, there's a man in the street starving, and there's a woman in the street hungry. You give them food. You don't ask again, are you a Jew? Are you a Gentile? You don't ask that question. You give them food, right? But Judaism takes it even a step further. You don't want to accept that. Okay. There's a concept called darkei shalom. You know what darkei shalom is? Darkei shalom is that we as Jews live in host countries. And we have to do everything we can in order to create an environment of peace within that host country, right? Part of that is giving back, predicated on what we've taken out of it. So for us to go out and to go to a church and to feed people there who are in terrible need, it's a Kiddush Hashem. God says, be holy like I am. It's a Kiddush Hashem. It's a holy thing. It's darkei shalom. It's bringing peace to our world. And really, the most important thing is you have hungry people there and we can help. Let's help. And you're right. There's a lot of stuff being done for hungry Jews. So you took up your time and you ensured that as a Jew, you went out and you were shlicha and you did a beautiful thing on behalf of the world in which we live. So the rabbi came at it from a very parochial point of view. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah, Barbara. You're muted.
Better?
Yeah, it's good.
I think it's not for us to judge others. I think that's very important.
Well, it's not for us to judge others, but the truth of the matter is we do have finite amount of resources, okay? So, you know, somebody has to ask the question, how do we use those resources? And I'll give you a very extreme example just to really define more so what I was saying. When I was at the United Jewish Appeal, that's when I did my very first humanitarian project. And what we did was we sent 2 or 3 people to Chad, which is a neighboring country to Rwanda. And essentially what we did was we helped out the people of Rwanda in a refugee camp in Chad, all right? We got Cipro, which is a medication. Most of us are familiar with it. It's a powerful, powerful medication that's used for a lot of stomach ailments. And we took it into the refugee camps and we worked with the Israelis there on disseminating or giving out these medications as well as other medications and other humanitarian goods, okay? So here's the challenge in front of us, Barbara. In that refugee camp, not only did you find Tutsis, the group of people who were put upon, the genocide was against them, but you found the Hutus. You found the people who were responsible for the genocide. So one of the questions that we asked was, what do? We have X amount of CPRO and other humanitarian goods. And we have people coming into the camp, both Hutus and Tutsis. Who do we give it to? We become judges at that point. As much as we don't want to judge, we are judging, and we always do. We try to limit it. We try to be fair. Torah talks extensively about the fairness of judgment. But here's a situation where you're working in a refugee camp. Who do you give it to? And these are not unusual questions. Ask any doctor about his or her responsibility of making judgment calls during the course of the day. Emergency doctors, who do you tend to? I have a limited amount of resources. Who do you tend to? You hear what I'm saying? So, I mean, the first answer obviously that people gave was you give to the person who's in need. And in the case, the people who were disseminating this stuff were doctors, and they took a Hippocratic oath. So their Hippocratic oath was, I don't care if this guy's a Nazi. If he's sick, then I have to tend to him. So might be extreme and may not be exactly like that on the ground. But the truth of the matter is we do judge. We do judge. Another beautiful instruction that we are given by the Torah, by our beautiful teachings as volunteers, is when you give food to a hungry person, give him or her your best and sweetest food. That's in Hilchos Ishrei Mizbayach. You have to give your best food, and you have to give your sweetest food. Now, here's something that Rav Shalom of Karlin in the 18th century said. He was a Hasidic Rebbe. And this is really beautiful. So listen closely. If you want to raise a person from the mud and filth, in other words, it's Rahmanis. This person's having a very hard time of life. And we've all met people like this. We all know people like this. Sometimes we have people like this in our family. It's just a Rahmanis. Do not think it is enough to keep standing on top and reaching a helping hand down to that person. You can imagine you're standing above them and it's down. That's the imagery that he creates. Metaphorically, he's speaking. You must go all the way down yourself, down into the mud and into the filth. Then take hold of the person with strong hands and pull the person and yourself out. And how does he conclude it? Into the light. It's a beautiful, beautiful words. Into the light. The Baal Shem Tov said, the founder of the Hasidic movement, he said, if you want to help your brother, if you want to help your sister, then you have to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and you have to be prepared to get your hands dirty. Okay? So what this speaks to basically is that there are times in our lives where we are called upon to volunteer, but not volunteer where we're called by the JF&CS. We have this beautiful position for you. We're going to put you through some education. Please come on Monday at 5. We'll need you for an hour and a half. Life's not that clean. It's not. The volunteerism that the Karlina Rebbe is talking about, it's where you're living in a shtetl, Nagid. You're living in a shtetl, right? And that's what it means by the mud and the filth. We all know the shtetl were not such clean places. They were full of mud. They were full of filth. They were hard places to live in. Just watch Fiddler on the Roof. And he said, and the poor people who were living in the town, the Rahmanis people, they were dirty, they were cold, they were filthy. Rabbi Sachs too, he talks about 17th and 18th century Britain. And he said that it was a terrible, terrible place to live, an awful place to live. And until some Reformation came around, he said people were suffering terribly. They didn't have what to eat. They didn't have clothing to change into. It's not like we could pop over to Walmart. I can buy a brand new T-shirt for 3 T-shirts for $10. We don't have to make them. But these people were living in subsistence, basically. So the Karlina Rebbe says, listen, you know, it's very nice that you're wearing beautiful white clothing for Shabbat, kol hakavod. That's what you should do to honor God. But he goes, you also have to recognize sometimes you are going to get them filthy dirty because you're doing something more important than meeting God at the gates of Shabbat. You're helping humankind. And we know from the story of Avram and Sarah that when they were talking to God, they left God to go over and to help those strangers. Now, here's something that's going to resonate with each and every one of us. It's not something we all do, but it's something we all say. Halach ma'anya diachalu avatanu ba'ara d'Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come share our Passover. Okay? This is the volunteerism that Judaism is talking about. It's opening your heart. It's opening your wallet, right? It's the sharing of your resources at a very, very, very real and important level, to the extent that the Agada, which we read every Pesach twice, says halach ma'anya, the bread of affliction. Those who are hungry, let them come and eat. In truth, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to open your front door. It's different days. We live in different times, so this doesn't really work. But this is what they say. You go to your front door and you literally shout out, those who are hungry, let them come and eat. And people come to your Pesach table and they join you. That's the volunteerism at a very, very, very base level, almost like at a very, what's the word? The root of volunteerism within Judaism is that you have to give of yourself. You have to share of yourself. Tikkun Olam is, again, it's the word for repairing the world. It's a word for making this world a better place. As I said before, God created a world that was not completed, but still it's our obligation to embrace our world, to love our world. Materialism is an extremely important thing in Judaism, to the extent that God said after each day that he created or she created the world, he or she said, and it was good. He was commenting on the material aspect of the world. I mentioned before that there is much written and there's much said about volunteerism in the world in general. And I did a little bit of research into the United Nations response to volunteerism. And here's what the United Nations writes. They write extensively. If you want to find more about volunteerism, go to their website. So what's the benefit, according to the UN studies, of volunteerism in the world? Number one, volunteerism can promote a culture of collaborative decision-making by contributing to shaping and prioritizing issues that are important to them and by working collaboratively with state authorities. That's true. When you work as a volunteer, okay, you really are promoting a culture of collaborative decision-making, right? Which you may not have in your work environment. You may not even have it in your family environment. But you'll find that if you do decide, let's say, to join a committee, and there's so many committees that one can join. I printed up some from Beth David and as well as from Beth Tikva. There's a plethora, 24 or so committees that people can volunteer for. All of a sudden, you have to masaru matan. You have to collaborate with people. You have to negotiate with people. So you're developing your negotiating skills, your collaborative skills, but you're also developing your relationship with others, which is not an easy thing to do. Volunteerism can alter unequal power relations. Through collaboration with state authorities, volunteers have the capacity to reconfigure unequal power relations. And basically what they're talking about is you have a committee, which is, let's say, structured to feed the poor, right? So that committee, let's say it's in Uganda. That committee will work with the local authorities, and the local authorities do not have the resources to feed the poor in the way that they need. So comes along volunteers and charities, and these are ubiquitous in environments like this, as they were and as they are in the Jewish world, and they work together to create sort of a more of a level, even playing field. Volunteerism offers diverse pathways to civic participation. Volunteers build bridges. Volunteers are often in the unique position of brokering relationships between service providers and beneficiaries. Can someone think of, in their own experience, can someone think of a very positive thing that came out of their volunteerism in terms of the development of their self? And clearly what I'm asking here is, at first blush, when I ask you about volunteerism, what's the beauty of it? Being that we're such a righteous group here, we're all going to respond by saying, you're helping other people. This person's hungry. Like Noreen, she went to the church. This person's hungry, you feed them. But we all know that the greatest thing that can come out of volunteerism, or the secondary thing, if you will, is the development of our own selves. Can someone speak to that for a moment about some volunteerism that you did and how you grew through it? Cora, we want to hear from you. It's our last week. Cora.
I ended up volunteering for the Jewish Historical Society in Washington State, writing grants for them. I had some writing experience, but not in grants. And I ended up learning a ton and being able to write grants for other organizations, and it helped me to get a job.
Yeah, that's very good. I remember when I used to work with you, Jay, I was trying to encourage people to volunteer. No, I don't want enough time. I said, look, the beauty of the Jewish world is there's only 15 million of us. Formally, informally, there's probably about 500 million, right? Anyone who does DNA will know that. I remember we used to hang out with people like Lawrence Bloomberg, Julia Koshitsky, she should rest in peace. We'd have the mayor of Jerusalem come and speak to us. I spent time with Elie Wiesel. I said, listen, that's the beauty of our Jewish communities, that we're small, we're fit, right? We're close to the ground, and there's an equality that exists within our ranks because of our smallness. So just by virtue of the fact that you're volunteering for an organization, let's say like the UJ, or in your case, in Washington, you get to meet a lot of fascinating people, and you can also grow career-wise, right? Because of those people that you're meeting. What was the job that you got subsequently?
I ended up going to get a master's and then work at Hillel in Waterloo.
Oh, okay. Very good. That's where I'm from, Kitchener-Waterloo. Yeah, and you're going back to the States, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to thank you very much, Cora, for what you've done. Big hand for Cora, everyone. Come on. It's a muted applause. Okay, very good. Who else wants to speak to their volunteerism and how they've benefited as an individual? Ellen.
Well, being the president of Beth David Women, it was sort of an interesting journey. Well, anyways, it doesn't matter how I got there, but it wasn't anything that I ever thought I would do, you know, being at the head of something, because whoever thought that I would be able to handle something like that. I do have to say that my ladies are helpful beyond, and I can't thank them enough. But I guess it made me grow as a person. It had to. I think I found out things about myself I didn't know. I didn't know that I could do. So
Is there a particular instance, program, a moment where you thought, my God, look what I've accomplished? Something toughless?
no, I can't think offhand.
Okay, it's gonna come up. It's gonna, when you have your head on the pillow tonight, you go.
Oh, of course. And I'm
Damn.
gonna call you.
Yeah,
I'll call you.
Give us a call. Somebody else had their hand up. Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you. Rhoda Shack. I think you're on mute, dear.
Oh,
Still can't hear you, Rhoda. Anybody read lips? I can't hear you, dear. I can't hear you.
can't see them.
Rhoda, I'm coming up later to get you a new computer.
All
I
right.
know what you said was gems. We need to get you a new computer. Okay, who else? Howard, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it. One of the perks you get from being a volunteer is working with people who are very committed, very wonderful people, no matter what their status in life is. And to me, that's been a tremendous perk. You make tremendous friends, role models, etc. So that's been a tremendous perk for me.
Yeah, you know, I talk to my son about friends all the time. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 friends, and we have shul friends, we have organizational friends. Howard's right. What happens is when you volunteer with an organization or a shul, etc., you start to make friends. Let's say in the case of a shul, you start to make shul friends, and they're your friends for life. They're your friends for life. So there you are, you're volunteering for one of the committees, let's say the house committee, and you're working with other people, some of whom are architects, etc. And you say, well, this is what a lovely opportunity this is to meet somebody new and to have them over for Shabbat and to make them my friend. So indeed, Howard, you are absolutely right. Anybody else? Thank you for that, by the way. Yeah, Barbara. Yeah, Barbara. Yeah.
I had volunteered to sit with a husband or a wife where the spouse was allowed, and I allowed the spouse to go out and actually meet with some friends or get her hair done or go and do some shopping or go to the gym. And it was really fascinating for me because it taught me to be a good listener. There was often the people who had trouble talking and expressing themselves. And as you know, a caregiver can get quite impatient.
Yeah.
And I was sort of the outlet where they've had somebody to talk to and listen to them. And it was really quite an eye-opener for me.
That's fantastic. Good for you. Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. Thinking as Barbara's speaking, I'm thinking about my dear friend Jeff Budd in Kitchener. Anybody know the Budds in Kitchener? Remember? Yeah, that's right, Howard. You do, right. And Jeff is the head of the Chevra Kadisha. And in the last 48 hours, he had 2 taharas, and which means he had 2 bodies that he had to take care of, clean and manage and get to the cemetery and so on. And I was talking to him today and I thought, and I said to him, I go, you know, you don't get paid for this. It's a real mitzvah. It's a real full, complete mitzvah because you don't get repayment from the family. And it's hard. He does the shmirah. He watched over the bodies. So he told me he was there all night. And then he came back in the morning to his apartment. He had a shower, he got changed, and he had a bite, and then he went off to the cemetery. And I told him, I said, how unbelievable is that you're giving of yourself in such a way at the end of a person's life that they can trust you in terms of your ability to do this tahara with great amounts of respect, to put the clay on the eyes, to put the little stick in the casket, how they can trust you at the end of their days. How special that is. And it's all volunteerism. There's no remuneration for that other than the mitzvah. Anybody else have something to share about their volunteerism and how they developed through it? Marla?
Just that I had the privilege with my sisterhood of leading the sisterhood Shabbat. And it was really amazing because, well, the women all were so eager to volunteer, which was excellent. But I really just learned a lot of leadership skills. I mean, I learned how to assign parts and all the professional things, to send them a letter. This will be your honor, and to keep track of everything. So putting everything together was really a leadership kind of thing, but
Yeah.
it was just so rewarding because the women were amazing and they all led their parts and things ran smoothly. And it was a tremendous service that the women did. It was amazing. So
Yeshua, nicely articulated and nicely done, Marla. Nicely done. Thank you so much. We have a few more minutes. I just want to point out a few opportunities in Toronto. If you are not currently volunteering and you want to volunteer, you can always be in touch with me and I can maybe try to direct you. You can be in touch with your shul. But I do recommend really strongly that you find a place to volunteer. And I know that some of you are going to be saying, you know what, Avram, I've been saying this for years and I just never had the time. I never took the initiative. Now today, so tomorrow morning, first thing is your chance. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Don't think about it. Just do it. You heard from Marla. You heard from others about how it can change your life, let alone change the lives of others. A few things that you may want to look at. There's a hospice being started in Toronto under the auspices of Dr. Sandy Buckman and a few others. And essentially, it's going to be for people who are dying. And they're going to have this beautiful place to go. Go online and check out the Neshama Hospice, okay? And knowing Sandy, there must be opportunities there. Here's a non-Jewish opportunity that was near and dear to me. It's called Operation Rainbow, and it's for medical personnel, but they travel abroad. It's called Operation Rainbow Canada, and they provide reconstructive surgery and related healthcare for cleft lip and cleft palate. If you are a medical personnel and you've often thought to yourself, I'd really like to go on a mission abroad. Via used to run medical missions abroad, And today I meet doctors and nurses and OTs and pharmacists and some administrative people who went on these trips to Guyana and South America and Zimbabwe and Haiti, et cetera, and it changed their lives. And it changed their lives. Jonathan Eisenstadt, the late Norman Epstein, it just brought so much to their lives. And you can imagine what it does for the people in these places, some of them the poorest places in the Western Hemisphere. I did come up with, I printed up a page from Beth David and from Beth Tikva, and just, I'm gonna read a few of these just for effect, more or less. You have current activities through the following committees at both these shuls. I mean, shuls have similar committees. The Adult Education Committee, you have the Budget Committee, the Catering Committee. How much fun it must be to be on the catering committee. You get to taste the cholent every Friday. You have the Cemetery Committee, you have the choir, right? Constitution and legal, dues relief, endowments, festivals, fundraising, governance, investment, Israel affairs. That would be fabulous. Here, I'm looking at Beth David. That was Beth Tick, the House and Property, Human Resources, Israel, Vichulu, et cetera, et cetera. Shuls are a bastion. They're really like a wonderful place to go and to develop yourself as a committee member. And very often what happens is somebody gets in at the bottom, if you will, and before they know it, they're working really, really hard, as Ellen stated before. And all of a sudden they see after 2-3 years that they're the head of the committee and their responsibilities have grown dramatically, and they can do amazing things. If you're not familiar with JVS, the Jewish Vocational Services, go online because they do beautiful things. They help people get jobs, Jew and non-Jew. If you're not familiar with the JF&CS, JF&CS, I know we all are. Again, the opportunities through the JF&CS are incredible. Homework Club Tutor, Cafe Europa Volunteer at the Bernard Battelle Center, Kits for a Cause volunteering, Jewish holiday volunteering. The list goes on and on and on. JIAS gives you the opportunity to work, you know, eye to eye with refugees, with people who have come to our beautiful country to share in its beautiful resources. And they have one program, a volunteer program, where you align your family with a refugee family, with a family who's come from another country like the Ukraine. So can you imagine having a young child or maybe grandchildren, and let's say once a week or what have you, you invite this family for Shabbat, you go to their house, you help them get their furniture, you help them get their clothing. My God, who could ask for more out of life? To share and to help others in such a way, and to do that with your children, with your eneklach. There's no greater education for your children and grandchildren and yourself than doing something like that. So I want to conclude this class by encouraging every one of you to tomorrow morning, I would say tonight, but it's getting late already. Tomorrow morning, if you've been saying for many years, I want to be a volunteer, tomorrow morning, that's your deadline. Your deadline is tomorrow morning. We'll give you until 11 o'clock. Okay, and you have to find something, write down 3 opportunities and investigate both. If you can't find something, you're welcome to email me. You'll find me, I'm on social media, and you're welcome, I'm sure, to email or communicate with our kind, fine people at Beth Tikva and at Beth David. We are members of a beautiful people. And what we have accomplished over the millennia it's miraculous. And it is because of volunteers. Moshe Rabbeinu was a volunteer in essence, right? The people who run our shuls, most of them are volunteers. Those who run our institutions, most institutions could not survive without volunteerism. And the list goes on and on and on. It's the effect that these people have on them, on others, and the Jewish community, and subsequently the non-Jewish community and themselves, which is the reason why we do that, why we volunteer. So I encourage you to find a place for yourself, a position for yourself, embrace it, love it, develop it, use your passion, use your skills, and just make the Jewish people a stronger, better people, make the world in which we live a stronger and better place. So with that, what are we, Tuesday night? It's too early to say Shabbat Shalom, I guess, but Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for coming to the shiurim. I really appreciate it. And the fact that so many of you returned and you came to all of them, that's a real, I feel very, very good about that. And I'm very, very grateful that you decided to come back. So yesher koach to you, and I look forward to doing this together once again very soon. And we should have health and we should have happiness, and things should be good for the Jewish people and the world in which we live.
Avram, on behalf of Beth David, Beth Tikva, and also Beth David Women, I just want to say thank you for sharing all of this with us. And with all this information, I'm sure that everybody picks something out, something that's important to them. But I have to say one thing, because you just reminded me of one silly story that I when I was working, which I'm not doing anymore, I was talking to somebody and we were talking about rich people and giving back to whatever. And the question that they asked me was, why do I think that's so important that people give back? And the first thing that actually came to my mind, which is not the answer I could give them, was, I don't know, because I'm Jewish and it's just a thing, but it wasn't the kind of person, so, but it is very true. I mean, not that only Jews give, but it is a thing with our people. Anyways, that just reminded me, but
You're right. You're right.
yeah. And as this is our closing program also for our Beth David Women for the season, the fact that we, Tikkun Olam is such a big part of what we do. I mean, this was so appropriate. It couldn't have been planned any better. So thank you for showing us that giving isn't just about money. And if anybody's looking for a Tikkun Olam project, they can join Beth David Women and we'll help them find a project.
Yeah, there you go.
I know Noreen will help them find a project, so call us. Anyways, thank you for this. It was just amazing listening to you and sharing in your wisdom, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you for everything you've done in the community. Thank you for thank you.
Thanks.